For 3 years, the night shift nurses at Memorial Hospital thought they knew Harold. Quiet security guard, kept to himself, always polite but never chatty. They never noticed how he checked exit routes every hour, or how his eyes scanned for threats that weren't there. They never questioned why a 68-year-old man moved like someone half his age, or why he always positioned himself with a clear line of sight to every entrance. Until the night everything changed. Welcome to Silent Legends. Before we dive into this story of hidden service and unexpected heroism, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like Harold's deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who serve in silence. Harold Martinez had been working the night shift at Memorial Hospital for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that anyone was counting, but Harold was the kind of man who noticed details. Details like how many steps it took to walk from a main entrance to the emergency department. 47 steps at a normal pace, 32 if you were running. Details like which vending machine on the 3rd floor had a broken light that created a blind spot. Details like the fact that the east stairwell door squeaked on the 4th step, but only when the humidity was above 60%. He arrived every evening at 10:45 p.m., 15 minutes before his shift officially started. Always the same routine. Park in the same spot, 3rd row back, position that gave him a clear view of all entrances. Walk through the employee entrance. Nod to whoever was behind the reception desk. Sign in with the same careful handwriting his drill instructors had drilled into him 45 years ago. Harold wore the standard security uniform, navy blue shirt, black pants, basic utility belt with a flashlight, radio, and keys. Nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. His badge read simply H. Martinez, Security. No first name, no unnecessary information. The way he preferred it, the hospital staff knew him as the quiet guy who worked nights. Reliable, professional, but not much for conversation. When nurses asked him about his weekend, he'd give short answers. Quiet, nothing special, just resting. They didn't know that Harold Martinez had never learned how to rest. Not really. Not after 2 decades in the Army, not after serving as a Special Forces medic in places whose names were still classified. Memorial Hospital at night was a different world. The daytime chaos of bustling corridors and constant announcements gave way to something quieter, more contemplative. Dim lighting in the hallways, soft beeping from patient rooms, the occasional footstep of a nurse making rounds. The emergency department maintained its energy, but even there, the pace felt different after midnight. Harold's rounds took him through every floor, every wing. He knew the layout better than most people who had worked there for decades. 3rd floor, cardiac wing, mostly older patients, families who stayed late holding hands in silence. 4th floor, surgical recovery, where people woke up changed and went back to sleep hoping they'd feel normal again. 5th floor, ICU, where miracles and heartbreak lived side by side, separated only by thin walls and the skill of people who had dedicated their lives to fighting death. The night shift nurses were a close-knit group. Sarah Chen, the charge nurse, had been there longer than anyone else. Calm under pressure, sharp sense of humor, the kind of person who could handle a code blue at 3 a.m. and still remember to ask about your kid's soccer game the next day. Then there was Marcus Williams, newer to the job but eager, always volunteering for the difficult assignments. Jessica Torres, the ICU specialist, who could read a patient's condition from across the room and somehow always knew exactly what needed to be done before anyone else figured it out. They all knew Harold, the way you know someone you see every day but don't really talk to. He was part of the landscape, reliable as the sunrise, quiet as a shadow. When he walked past, they'd nod, maybe exchange a word about the weather or how busy the shift had been. But they never really saw him. Not the way you see someone when you're trying to understand who they are beneath the surface. Harold didn't mind being invisible. In fact, he preferred it. Visibility had gotten him in trouble in the past. In places where being noticed meant becoming a target. He had learned to move through spaces without drawing attention, to observe without being observed. It was a skill that had kept him alive in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in other places where American soldiers weren't supposed to be but were anyway, doing the jobs that needed to be done in the shadows. Every night, Harold walked the same route. Basement level first, supply rooms, maintenance areas, places where someone could hide if they wanted to cause trouble. Ground floor, emergency department, main lobby, visitor areas. Then up through each floor, methodical, thorough. Not because hospital administration required it, but because Harold Martinez had been trained to secure perimeters, and some habits died hard. The other security guards thought he was obsessive. It's a hospital, Harold, not a forward operating base, one of them had joked. Harold had smiled politely and continued his rounds. They didn't understand that in Harold's experience. The places where you felt safest were often the places where you needed to be most careful. On this particular Tuesday night in November, Harold was completing his 11:30 p.m. rounds when he heard it. Not an alarm, not a call for help, just a sound that didn't belong. A soft thud from the employee break room on the 4th floor, followed by silence. Most people would have ignored it, assumed someone had dropped something, moved on with their night. But Harold had been trained to investigate sounds that didn't belong, and 20 years of muscle memory kicked in before his conscious mind had time to process what he was doing. He moved toward the break room with the same quiet efficiency he had once used to approach potentially hostile compounds. No rushed footsteps, no unnecessary noise. Just purposeful movement guided by decades of experience in situations where the difference between careful and careless could mean the difference between life and death. The break room door was slightly open, and through the crack, Harold could see Dr. Sarah Chen on the floor. She was conscious but clearly in distress, her breathing rapid and shallow, her face flushed. Harold recognized the signs immediately: anaphylactic shock. Severe allergic reaction. Without immediate intervention, she would be dead in minutes. Duddy pushed through the door and knelt beside her, his hands already moving with the kind of precision that come from having performed the same actions in life or death situations more times than anyone should have to count. "Dr. Chen, can you hear me?" His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he had used to reassure wounded soldiers in field hospitals thousands of miles away. "You're having an allergic reaction. I'm going to help you." Sarah's eyes were wide with panic, but she managed a small nod. Harold quickly assessed her condition: rapid pulse, difficulty breathing, swelling around the face and throat. Classic anaphylaxis. He needed epinephrine, and he needed it now. Harold reached for his radio, but instead of calling for help, he did something that would later make the hospital staff question everything they thought they knew about the quiet security guard. He began giving medical instructions with the authority and precision of someone who had been trained in advanced life support. "This is Martinez in the 4th floor break room. I need an EpiPen and advanced airway management up here immediately. Patient is a 34-year-old female experiencing severe anaphylactic reaction, probable food allergy trigger. Breathing is compromised. Pulse is rapid but strong. I'm initiating basic life support measures now." While he waited for the medical team, Harold positioned Sarah to keep her airway open, monitored her pulse, and began the kind of calm, methodical assessment that trauma medics learn in the field. He checked for additional symptoms, looked for signs that the reaction was progressing, and kept up a steady stream of reassuring conversation to keep Sarah conscious and calm. "You're going to be fine. Dr. Chen. I know it feels scary, but we've got you. Just focus on my voice and try to stay calm. Help is on the way." When the medical team arrived, they found Harold supporting Sarah's airway with one hand while taking a pulse with the other, his movements confident and sure. As they took over her care, administering epinephrine and preparing to move her to the emergency department, Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, looked at Harold with confusion. "Martinez, where did you learn airway management?" Harold stood up slowly, brushing off his uniform. "Army," he said simply. "Long time ago." Dr. Martinez stared at him for a moment, then shook his head. "That wasn't basic first aid. That was advanced life support." "What was your MOS?" Harold hesitated for just a moment. "Military Occupational Specialty. MOS." It had been years since anyone had asked him that question. 68W, he said finally. "Combat medic. Later cross-trained for Special Forces medical operations." The room went quiet. Even the nurses who were preparing to transport Sarah paused. 68W was the MOS for Army combat medics. But Special Forces medical training was something else entirely. That was the kind of training you got when you were expected to perform surgery in the field, to keep people alive in conditions where conventional medicine couldn't help. Dr. Martinez looked at Harold with new eyes. "How long did you serve?" 20 years, Harold replied. "Retired as a sergeant first class. Multiple deployments." He paused, then added quietly, "Mostly places you wouldn't have heard of." As the medical team wheeled Sarah away, stable now thanks to Harold's quick intervention, word began to spread through the hospital. The quiet security guard wasn't just a retired soldier. He was a Special Forces medic, trained in some of the most advanced combat medicine in the world. Someone who had probably saved more lives in more difficult conditions than most of the hospital staff would see in their entire careers. Over the following days, Harold noticed the change. The way people look at him when he walked past. The respectful nods from doctors who had previously barely acknowledged his existence. The questions that nurses wanted to ask but weren't quite sure how to phrase. Dear Chen, recovered and back to work, sought him out during his rounds. "Harold," she said, "I wanted to thank you." Dr. Martinez said if you hadn't acted so quickly. Harold nodded once. "Just doing my job." "That wasn't a security guard doing his job," she replied. "That was a medic saving a life." Harold was quiet for a moment, then said, "Same thing, really. Taking care of people." Sarah studied his face, seeing him clearly for the first time since they'd worked together. "How many lives do you think you've saved?" Harold considered the question. In field hospitals in Afghanistan, on convoy routes in Iraq, in villages where he was the only medical support for miles. "Hard to say," he said finally. "Never kept count." But Sarah could see in his eyes that the number was higher than most people would believe. And she understood now why Harold moved the way he did. Why he noticed things others missed. Why he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested in ways most people couldn't imagine. The hospital had always been safe with Harold Martinez on duty. They just hadn't realized how safe until the night they saw him do what he had been trained to do, what he had spent 20 years perfecting in some of the most dangerous places on earth. Some men retire from service and try to forget what they learned. Others, like Harold, carry their skills quietly through the rest of their lives, waiting for the moments when those skills might be needed again. When that moment came, Harold was ready. He had always been ready. AS for the night shift staff at Memorial Hospital. They never again looked at Harold Martinez as just a security guard. They saw him for what he had always been, a guardian, a protector, a man whose service had never really ended. Even after he hung up his uniform and put on a different one. So I ask you, Have you ever met someone like Harold? Someone whose quiet demeanor hid a lifetime of service and sacrifice. Someone who continued to serve long after their official duty ended. Share their story in the comments. Because here at Silent Legends, we believe that the most powerful stories are often the ones told in whispers, carried by people who never asked for recognition, only for the chance to help. Thank you for watching. If Harold's story moved you, please subscribe and share this video. Help us honor those who serve in silence, who carry their skills and their service with quiet pride, and who remind us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear security uniforms and work the night shift, watching over us while we sleep. Until next time, remember, the person standing guard might be protecting more than you know.